A chaste college freshman unknowingly participates in an adult movie, and with the help of her friends, must track down the producer to stop the film's release before it ruins her life. One morning, married couple Harold and Bernice White sit their daughter Priscilla down to give her a talk about human reproduction. They explain that she'll soon reach the age where boys are gonna pressure her into giving up her innocence, but they advise that she remain chaste until marriage. However, the concerned Bernice shows the girl a male prophylactic and says she should have it with her at all times just to be safe. 10 years later, during the Can't Hurry Love Chastity Organization's Purity Ball, Priscilla takes a sacred vow to remain pure in mind and body by abstaining from intimate relations until marriage. Then, Harold places the purity ring on his daughter's finger and they share a kiss. As they dance after the ceremony, Priscilla's boyfriend, Brad, cuts in, and the father reminds them to keep a little space between their bodies at all times. Later, the organization's president, Mary Margaret, last year's recipient of the Can't Hurry Love College Scholarship, shares that she's continuing to uphold their sacred abstinence vows at the University of Michigan. Moments later, she locks eyes with Brad as he stands next to his oblivious girlfriend. Then, Mary Margaret announces Priscilla as the winner of this year's scholarship, and she excitedly heads to the stage. The woman thanks the mentor and her parents for instilling in her the values that got her to this moment. She promises to uphold the standards of decency and morality that the organization represents as she enters Pennington College. One day, while the couple hangs out in the car, Priscilla laments that she and her boyfriend won't get to see each other once school starts. She asks Brad if he's willing to wait until she's ready to do the deed, and he affirms. To her disgust, she sees another couple making love in the adjacent vehicle and says she'd like to slap some sense into the woman. During the first day of school, the woman meets her new hallmates, Chuck and Kevin, and Kevin's girlfriend, Eileen. When the trio learns that Priscilla's new roommate is Natalie Reed, or the Naz, they cautiously warn her that crazy things usually happen whenever she's around. Later, the free-spirited Naz enters the room and introduces herself to the freshmen. To the straight-laced woman's horror, the roommate dumps her clothes on the floor and takes out illicit substances and an adult toy from her bag. So Priscilla talks to the resident advisor and asks if she can switch rooms, but there aren't any available beds at the moment. The disappointed student calls her boyfriend to explain her unfortunate situation, but Brad pretends like he has a bad connection because he's currently at a party. Meanwhile, Ed Curtzman, an infamous adult film producer best known for the Chicks Go Crazy series, arrives at Pennington College with his cameraman Rudy. The excited female students rush toward the man's bus and flash their chests, hopeful they'll get included in his next movie. Later, Chuck asks the woman to come to a party with him, but she politely declines the invitation and says she has a boyfriend. Then, she finds Naz doing the deed with 3 other people in their room, so she immediately leaves. Days later, the roommate rifles through Priscilla's belongings and learns that she's part of a purity club. So the woman explains that she promised to save herself before marriage, unlike her who treats her body like an amusement park. Naz continues mocking the student by using lewd language and asking inappropriate questions, prompting her to leave the room. The next day, Chuck uses crude pickup lines on Priscilla, but none of them work. Later, the 2 men and the roommate encourage the woman to go to a party tonight, but she refuses because she'd rather study. That evening, Priscilla calls Brad, but he doesn't pick up, so she leaves a voicemail instead. At the party, Ed tells his cameraman to film as many topless women as he can. Meanwhile, the student tries to go to sleep, but the loud music from the shindig keeps her awake, so she heads to the party to complain about the noise, and Naz encourages her to stay for 5 minutes. Then, the roommate hands the woman a gelatin dessert but chooses not to disclose that it contains alcohol. Soon, the inebriated student dances on top of a table and Naz places a moose mascot head over her face. Later, Priscilla ends up in her undergarments, and Ed tells Rudy to film her when she exposes her chest. The next day, the woman wakes up on the floor with a used male prophylactic in her hair and wonders what happened last night. As she runs back to her dorm, the other students tease that she's doing a walk of shame. While she takes a shower, Naz reveals that Priscilla consumed so many Jell-O shots last night and the Chicks Go Crazy crew captured her inappropriate behavior on camera. Devastated, the student says that if her parents see the movie, they're gonna kill her. She adds that if Can't Hurry Love finds out about what she did, they'll retract the scholarship. The roommate teases that she can always find a career in the adult film industry, prompting the furious Priscilla to attack her. Fortunately, the three hallmates hear the commotion and separate the women. The student thinks her life is ruined. So Chuck says he did some research on the producer and learned that he's on his way to Oktoberfest in Detroit. He suggests they find Ed and convince him to give them the footage. The man adds that they can use his father's credit card and be there by sundown. And the desperate woman agrees to the plan because it's the only way to keep her scholarship. Soon, Priscilla, Naz, Chuck, and Kevin leave for Detroit, and Eileen stays behind because she has a test tomorrow. When they arrive at the hotel, Chuck and the freshmen sing along to a cheesy ballad on the radio. However, to the man's disappointment, the woman says it's hers and her boyfriend's song and she misses him. In the hotel room, the women share the bed while the men sleep on the couch. Then, the curious Naz asks the student if she's ever had any fantasies, and the latter admits that she has. She shares that her ultimate fantasy is finally making love to Brad at 8:45 p.m. on their wedding night. Unbeknownst to the pair, Chuck listens to Priscilla listing her dream wedding day schedule. When she asks the roommate for hers, Naz begins explaining a lewd story, prompting the former to wonder why she never takes anything seriously. So the blonde reasons that life isn't as serious as the freshman thinks it is, and she chooses to live her life freely. The next day, while Priscilla is busy looking at a map of Michigan, she doesn't notice Ed getting on the elevator. When her friends arrive, the freshman says she and Naz will canvass the east side of the street while the men take the west. If any of them see Ed, they should contact the other pair immediately. If none of them see him by the end of the day, they'll meet back at the hotel tonight. Moments later, Chuck whispers that they should return to the hotel at 8:45 p.m., subtly implying that he heard the women's conversation last night. While Priscilla and Naz navigate the chaotic festivities, the men purchase contraband brownies from a vendor. Later, the roommate tells the freshmen that they should check inside a gentleman's club since it's the type of place the sleazy producer would go to. Inside, the chaste student averts her gaze from all the underdressed women and creepy men in the establishment. In another room, Naz pays a male exotic dancer to carry Priscilla on stage and give her a lap dance, which the student discreetly enjoys. Meanwhile, at the hotel, three elderly women enthusiastically flash their chests at Ed. That evening, the freshman leaves another voicemail message for Brad because he still hasn't returned her calls. Then she calls her parents and says she needs to ask them something, and the couple assumes she broke her vow. The daughter assures that she's still pure and asks what would happen if she hypothetically lost her scholarship. So Harold says she can always come back home and go to the nearby Richdale Agricultural College. To end the call, Priscilla lies and says she has to go because she has to attend a study group. Moments later, Naz appears and asks what's wrong. So the student says that if the film ever gets released, her parents are gonna disown her, and even though she's never done the deed, she's still gonna be labeled as a loose woman. The roommate encourages her to look on the bright side and view her situation as a chance at a new beginning. Then, she hands the freshmen some brownies that she got from Chuck and Kevin. Naz promises that they'll find the producer and she'll do whatever it takes to get the disc back because that's what friends do for each other. Later that night, the intoxicated student gets out of bed and stumbles along the hallway grabbing half-eaten food from the trays outside the rooms. The dazed Priscilla runs into the inebriated producer, but nothing fruitful happens during the nonsensical conversation. Then, the woman mistakes Rudy's hotel room number for her own and she lies down next to the cameraman. The next day, she thinks the man's member is Naz's adult toy, and she screams when she realizes what she'd done. When the horrified freshman runs out of the room, the cameraman believes he's fallen in love. During breakfast, Priscilla tells the roommate that she is going to hell for what she did, so the latter assures her that she won't. The student doesn't understand how it could have happened, so the blonde admits the brownies she ate last night were laced with an illicit substance. suspicious, explaining her odd behavior. The men join them at the table, and Chuck tells the freshman to eat something so she can feel better. However, she recounts everything that she's done in the past 2 days, which she strongly believes guarantees that she is going to hell. Suddenly, they hear a crowd chanting, "Chicks go crazy" outside. So Naz tells her to confront the producer once and for all. In the middle of the crowd, Ed tells his fans that he is only filming clotheless women because he thinks it's unfair that men can take their tops off without any repercussions, disingenuously excusing his work as a form of feminism. Then, he points at 2 women and encourages them to make out for the camera. However, Priscilla suddenly appears and begs the man for the footage of her at the party because her life depends on it. Unfortunately, Ed says he won't do it, so Kevin counters that the freshman didn't sign a release form, which means they have the grounds to take legal action against him. The producer doesn't take the threat seriously, so Naz says that he already has unlimited footage of other women that he can use. But the man just tells Priscilla that her clotheless body being in the movie isn't a big deal. Eventually, the blonde tells Chuck to discreetly follow Ed around the whole day while he shoots footage for the movie. For the next few hours, the producer talks to drunk women and tells them to expose their bodies to the camera. Soon, Chuck gets overwhelmed by all the clotheless women he sees on the street and returns to the hotel. The others ask if he has any new information about Ed, and he says that while the man's out filming in the street, he leaves his empty bus in a parking lot 4 blocks away, and he believes the footage is inside the vehicle. The elated Priscilla says she could kiss the man out of gratitude, but clarifies that she'd only do it if she didn't have a boyfriend. Later, the group breaks into the bus and the woman finds a picture of the producer and his daughter Becca. Suddenly, they hear Ed and Rudy's voices from outside, so they run out of the vehicle to escape. The producer attacks Kevin while he's answering a call from Eileen, and the girlfriend mistakes the grunts for lovemaking and thinks the man's cheating on her. The cameraman chases the roommates, but he loses them in the crowd. Then, he picks up Priscilla's shoe from the ground and gives it a sniff. Soon, the 2 women get separated and the freshman spots Brad in the distance. To her shock, she finds her boyfriend in an alleyway doing the deed with Mary Margaret, revealing that they're both hypocrites who aren't honoring their vows. Heartbroken, the woman returns to the festivities and orders an alcoholic drink from a vendor. Because she doesn't have any cash, she hands over the purity ring as her payment and says she doesn't need it anymore. At the hotel, Chuck takes out Ed and Becca's picture and uses his computer to try and find any information about the daughter. Suddenly, Priscilla barges into the room and tells the man that Brad and Mary Margaret have been doing the deed behind her back all this time. She realizes that everything her mentor and the organization stood for was a lie, and she can't believe she was saving herself for her boyfriend. Determined to lose her innocence, the freshman takes off her clothes and pounces on Chuck, since she's aware of how much he likes her. However, the man doesn't want the woman's first time to happen when she's inebriated and upset. He adds that he doesn't want to be part of something that she's going to regret. Confused, Priscilla doesn't understand why he's refusing to make love to her, so she puts on her clothes and says she'll go out and find a random guy to do it with. After unsuccessfully convincing the student to stay in the hotel, Chuck tells Naz to find her roommate before she sleeps with a stranger. At a bar, the woman tries her very first cigarette but ends up having a coughing fit. Then she approaches a guy and starts flirting with him, but to her disappointment, she realizes that he is also attracted to men. Eventually, Naz finds Priscilla leaving the bar and explains that she isn't thinking straight and merely reacting to Brad and Mary Margaret's affair. However, the freshman counters that she isn't taking any advice from someone who doesn't know what to do with her life. Offended, the blonde walks away, so the student apologizes and says she isn't acting like herself. So Naz states that all she wants the friend to do is take her time and think about what she wants. She adds that she doesn't care if Priscilla wants to sleep around or stay chaste the rest of her life, as long as it's her choice. Later, the women return to the hotel and Kevin says tonight is their last chance to talk to the producer because he's leaving for Miami tomorrow morning. Soon, they attend the Chicks Go Crazy event with the help of Becca, who Chuck was able to track down on the internet. Backstage, the freshman asks the producer to give her the footage so that she can keep her scholarship and get an education. but she says she's never going to get it. Suddenly, Becca appears and the father says she shouldn't be there. However, she says she's aware he's taking advantage of women, but he counters that he doesn't force them to do anything they don't want to. Then, Priscilla asks Ed what he'd do if his daughter was in the same predicament, but he says Becca would never do anything like that. To his surprise, the daughter lifts her shirt, prompting the man to avert his gaze in horror. Because the producer blames the student for what happened, he threatens to post the footage online tomorrow so everyone can watch it, ruining her life. So the woman says that she felt sorry for herself this whole time, but she pities him even more. Unbeknownst to Ed, his microphone turns on, and the crowd hears his disparaging remarks about the women who participate in the videos and the men who watch them. When the man finally gets on stage, the angry mob humiliates him by tearing off his clothes, all while Rudy films the embarrassing moment. 1 week later, Priscilla tells Naz that she resigned from the chastity organization even though she's unsure if the footage ever got out. Later, she talks to Chuck and learns one of the reasons why he turned her down at the hotel was because he too has never done the deed. Delighted with the information that the guy she likes is also inexperienced and respectful, the freshman finally kisses the man. In the room, the student opens a package from Rudy containing the disc of the party footage and learns that she wasn't the woman wearing the moose head because she's seen throwing up several feet away. Days later, Eileen, Naz, and Kevin give the freshman a lecture about proper prophylactic use before her date. That evening, Priscilla and Chuck finally make love, and the proud roommate smiles when she hears the sounds from the adjacent room.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.